audit and compliance software company. That's all that we do. So we don't do Dynamics NAV implementations or consulting or anything like that. We leave that to partners like Solution Systems, and we concentrate solely on the development and support of our suite of tools that add functionality to your Dynamics NAV system in terms of being able to handle security, audit, and compliance. We were founded in 2004. Our headquarters are in Des Moines, Iowa. We're a Microsoft Gold Competency ISV and ERP, and all that means is that our staff is certified in the different Dynamics solutions. We also have CPAs and certified internal auditors that work on staff, help us develop our tools, make sure we're following all the latest accounting standards. We have over 1,000 customers, installs across 30 countries. And the next slide is just illustrating some of our clients. And the only reason why we put this here is really to demonstrate that we don't have any particular client type or client profile that we work best with. We have clients in all different industries of all different sizes, from as small as 2 to 3 users to as large as thousands of users across multiple entities. And we have clients that are in pharma, retail, manufacturing, distribution, state and local government, gaming, web services, etc. So we really run the gamut here at Fastpath. And the reason for that is that really security, audit, and compliance should be a concern for any company regardless of size. And as a matter of fact, those smaller companies where you can't have a lot of segregation of duties within the system have to be a little bit more vigilant because you might have people that have a lot of access only because that's a necessity in your organization. You need to get things done on a daily basis. So that's just something to be aware of. The products that we offer for Dynamics NAV are as follows. They're on the screen. I'm going to talk you through each one, and then we're going to see a demo of each of the products and kind of how they work and how they interact. So we have our Assure tool. It's our risk-based security access review and segregation of duties analysis platform. This tool gives you a very in-depth look to all the potential risks in your organization based on the access you've granted to Dynamics NAV. So if I give you a really high-level example, a risk could be that a user has access to create a vendor and they have access to pay that vendor. So it's not a preventive tool. It doesn't stop the user from doing their job, but what it does is it allows you as an organization to decide, first and foremost, is that access even appropriate for that particular user? Should they have that access? If the answer is no, then you're going to want to take steps to actually go through and modify that user's access in the system. If the answer is yes, that person absolutely needs that access, you know, it's part of their job responsibility, then what it does is it allows you to document your compensating control for that risk. So maybe there's an external process, a manual process that kind of helps alleviate that risk. Maybe all of the checks are actually printed and signed by somebody else and it requires dual signatures, etc. You're using positive pay with the bank and all kinds of different things that could possibly be controls, and you can document that in our system. Okay, or if there are no controls, then it actually is a good time to start, saying, okay, now that we've identified these risks, we really do need to start putting together a control profile and building some controls around these risks. Okay, so that's what the Assure tool helps you do. The Audit Trail tool. The way that we like to describe this product is it's like the changelog but better. Okay, and that's things that the clients say about us. I mean, that's not the greatest tagline, but that's what we hear our clients saying. And the reason why they say that is because with changelog, you can track all kinds of changes in Dynamics NAV, and that's what our tool allows you to do as well. It's a continuous monitoring solution that tracks all changes to critical data. You as an organization decide what's critical. However, what we hear is that the users that are using changelog have a very hard time getting the information that they've tracked out of the system into a useful report or into useful reports. Our tool has a reporting front end already built into it with a bunch of pre-built reports. We have the ability to actually, we have a little GUI report generator to actually create new reports, and the data is very easily mineable and readable, and you can query on it, etc., so you can see those changes very easily. The tool is also pretty easy as far as getting it set up, and you can be up and running with our tools in a matter of hours and days. We don't measure our implementation time in weeks and months, we measure them in hours and days. So really easy out-of-the-box solutions. As we go through the products, you'll see that Assure and Audit Trail each have their own sets of reports that are delivered with the tool. Audit View allows you to take those reports and actually add another level of functionality onto it. It allows you to take those reports and assign and schedule them to be automatically delivered. You can also use the Audit View tool to build an internal audit calendar, a calendar of responsibility. Who should be reviewing which reports, what time frame they should be reviewed in. You can see if those reviews have actually been done, etc. Okay, so that's a little bit about us and a little bit about our tools. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and actually get into the live demo. And so what I've done here is I'm actually in our GRC Studio, as it's called. And our GRC Studio, let me just make this a little bit bigger. Our GRC Studio here is the home for all of our reporting products. So when you log in, you're at this home area. You can set up some quick links to reports and places. And then you have the tools here in the bottom left. You have Assure, you have Audit Trail, you have Audit View, so those three that I just talked about. Then you have your administration panel, which is actually where you configure and set up security to this GRC Studio. So if you notice, I'm not logging into Dynamics NAV at all. We don't use any Dynamics NAV licenses. We are simply mining information from Dynamics NAV to use in this tool. Anybody can be a user of this tool as long as they're in your domain. They have an Active Directory account. We can set them up as a user, and you can properly secure whatever user has access to. So maybe you have users that should only have access to Assure. Maybe you have users that should have access to both Assure and Audit Trail. Maybe your Audit Trail users should only have access to specific Audit Trail reports. You can securitize all of that. So it is a very, very securable software as far as who can see what. When the software is actually delivered to you, we provide unlimited training, unlimited support, etc. So that will help you make sure that you configure this tool exactly the way that your organization needs it to be configured. Okay. So if we start with the Assure side of things, this is, like I said, our segregation of duties analysis tool, but it also gives us an in-depth look to our NAV security. So we can have a list of all of the users that have been set up in NAV. So under the Assure NAV area, we do have some out-of-the-box NAV security reports. They all reside in this reports panel here. We have the user role list, so we can see all of the roles assigned to a user. We can see it by company. Anytime we're in these reports here, we can filter. So if I only wanted to see the security for Cronus International, we could do that, and I can see who's been set up as a user and what roles they've been granted. You see we have a lot of super users. We don't necessarily recommend that. But if I wanted to clear that filter, down here at the bottom there is a filter bar, and I can just click the X and clear that. We can print. We can export whenever we're in this model. We have 8 different file types that we can export to, including PDF and Excel. We can sort. So if we wanted to sort by role ID, we could do that. If we wanted to sort by user ID, we could do that as well. Okay? Completely dependent on how you would like to see your reports. If when you log into the report, you want to see maybe the company first, so we slide that over, we can move all of these headers around, and then from there we want it sorted by company. We can do that, and then we can hit Save Layout, so that the next time that we log into the tool, or the next time we run that report, so if I go to run a different report, let's say I run my super user list. Here is just another security report I have, and I go back to that user role list. Now that layout that I've changed has been, oh, I thought it was saved. Apparently I didn't save it. Apologize. But it should have saved that layout here, and that way the next time I go into this report, it would just show it exactly like this. So I don't have to actually make those changes every time. So we do have those tools available for the reports that you see in screen, the filtering, the being able to print and export the different file types, being able to save those layouts, and these are all out of the box reports that you see here. The other thing that I really like about this tool is if you really quickly wanted to see who had access to a specific area of the system. So let's say I wanted to see who had access to create vendors. I know that that object type is table data and the object name is vendor. So I'm going to look for my vendor under table data, and I'm going to go ahead and hit go, and it's going to tell me once this finishes loading who has access to that object and what type of access they have. So I can see if they have read, insert, modify, delete, execute. So once we have this information, we can again print it or export it. So I see that all of these users have access to the vendor object. And if I was to click on any user, I can see the roles that we're giving them access here in the details panel on the right-hand side. Now, again, all of my users are pretty much set up as super users, so that's why I'm seeing that, but I can see that. And I can do this for any, I can see this for any object again. So if I wanted to look at vendors, I wanted to look at customers, I wanted to look at purchase orders, etc., I could do that very quickly and easily. Now, my auditors come in once a quarter and they have very specific areas that they're interested in seeing who has access to. Okay, so those areas, again, I can come here, I can find the object and hit print, but they have like 10 different areas. And so I don't want to do that 10 times and give them 10 reports. I'd rather consolidate that. And so we have the ability to do so under this tab that says Customize Critical Access. This Customize Critical Access button, all it does is it allows you to create a group of objects, okay? And you can select, you can make groups based on different object types, so you can have table data, reports, forms, etc., and you can mix and match. And you just select the object that you would like to report on and move it over using the radio buttons. So here in my group that I've created called Audit, and I can have as many groups as I want, I have the following areas that my auditors are always asking about. So they're asking about bank accounts or customer bank account or payment terms, etc. So now, instead of having to go to each of those windows individually, I can come to Critical Access, and again, I can just select my group that I've created called Audit and click Go, and now I very quickly and easily have a report that shows me all of my users that have access to the objects in that group. So I'm going to just sort by object description to try to keep them all together. And I can see what type of access my users have, and then I can go ahead and print this and give this to the auditor. So instead of having to do that, 10 or 12 times the individual reports, I have one consolidated report, and that only took me a few seconds to run. Okay, so now my quarterly tasks have been reduced from maybe, having to mine this information from NAV directly. It could take a good, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. It's taking me all of 10 seconds. And I can just go ahead and deliver this report to the auditors, and they're happy, and I'm happy because I didn't have to do a lot of labor to get to this report. Okay, but the biggest piece of the Assure tool is our conflict listing. And so what we have done is we've built a rule set for an out-of-the-box Dynamics NAV install. So this rule set is based on all of your modules that get installed with a base NAV install. Now, with that being said, it is editable, it is customizable. So if you have custom objects in NAV and access to those custom objects in conjunction with another object could create a potential risk in your organization, we can modify this conflict listing. Under the conflicts tab, we can add/edit conflicts, and we can modify this conflict listing. And all a conflict is access to two different objects. So for example, if you have access to the GL account object and you have access to any of these objects here in the column that's called Object 2, so posting groups or setup windows or the general journal batch or things like that, you could potentially maintain fictitious or erroneous GL master data and assign it to posting settings. If you had access to the customer object, and then you had access to any of these types of things like payment terms or payment method, you could potentially maintain fictitious payment terms and assign it to a customer, or fictitious payment methods and assign it to a customer, etc. So we've gone through and we have really mapped all of the potential risks that you can grant in a system out. So what do we do with this conflict listing? Well, there's a couple of things that we can do with it. The first is we can analyze what our users have access to. So if I come to user conflicts and I select a specific user, I'm going to see, based on their access, how many conflicts they actually have. Now, in my demo system, unfortunately, everybody's a power user. So with that being said, everybody's going to have all 83 conflicts. Right? So if I run this conflict for Cassidy, I'm going to see that he has access to all the different conflicts, and if I look why, it's because he has that super role. Okay? But if this was this wasn't a demo system, this was your live system, this was your production environment, hopefully not every user is set up as a super user. Hopefully you have some pretty well-defined roles, and you can set up those users with those well-defined roles, etc., and they're only granting access to the pieces of the system that they should have access to. Then you would start to see less than 83 conflicts. Now, the number of conflicts isn't really 100% what we care about. We're never going to get to a zero conflict environment. We can't hire people to press one button all day long, unfortunately. It's just not very realistic. So people are going to have, they are going to have certain risks based on the access that they've been granted. But what we don't want you to do is concentrate on the number of risks, but rather what these users have access to. So if they have access, the objects that they have access to, are they appropriate for their role within the organization? If you're seeing objects for this particular user that are not appropriate, then you need to make some changes to their security. Okay, but if everything that you see here is appropriate for what their role is, what their tasks are on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, etc., then what we can start doing here in this window is we can start documenting our mitigations. So if I was to click on a status, and I can click on any one of these are all hyperlinks. We have some that are new, some that are proposed, some that are approved. I'll click on a new one. So if somebody had access to customer and general journal line, they could potentially maintain customer data and create erroneous cash receipts. So we're going to go ahead and click new. And here, we're going to document how we're mitigating this risk in our organization. So our mitigate window is going to go ahead and open up here. And all it does is in the first 5 rows, it just reiterates the conflict ID, the description, and the 2 objects that make the conflict, the risk level, etc. Then we have mitigation/resolutions in the drop-down. These do ship out of the box, these 6, but they can be, again, customized and set up to your organization's needs, so you can add, edit, and delete any of these mitigations that you see here. So we're going to say that here there's a review and approval process. Actually, I'm going to say that it's actually an other. And then again, we have statuses, and again, you can continue to add to these. These are the 4 that ship out of the box, but I'm just going to set this to proposed right now, because I'm documenting what we're doing in the organization. Maybe I'm the manager for this particular employee, and I'm documenting what we do to control this risk. But internal audit's going to take a second look, and then they're going to decide if that control is actually in place and working, and so they're going to set it to approved. Okay, so for the time being, I'm just going to put it to proposed. And if this user has access to multiple companies, I don't need to mitigate for each company individually. I can just select all of the companies, and that will do the mitigation for both. And I can put in some notes here, and I can say customers are tracked with Audit Trail, and those reports are reviewed weekly, etc. So whatever our mitigating control is, it can be documented here. So we're going to go ahead and hit save, and now we've started to document our controls. Okay. So at this point, you have, the ability to actually go through and start documenting all of your controls, understanding where all of your risks are. Maybe we don't have controls around certain processes, and now's the time to start thinking about building some. Maybe some of these areas aren't really high risk in your organization. So you want to set the you want to ignore the conflict, and you can do that under the edit conflicts area. You can actually set the risk level to ignore, and then that conflict won't even be considered in your analysis. So that's completely up to you. The other thing that we can do with the conflict listing is under role conflicts, we can analyze roles that we have set up in the system. So if we're building new roles and kind of want to see what their impact is prior to actually going ahead and you know, assigning those roles to users, or maybe we have roles set up and we're setting up a new user and we're going to add a bunch of roles to that user, we want to see what the impact is, we can do that. We can analyze one role or multiple roles at the same time. We just select them here. So I'm going to analyze the GL roles all together. So if I was to assign all of these GL roles to a particular user, I would like to see what kind of conflicts that potentially creates. So I'll go ahead and click OK, and I'll click Go. And if I was to assign all of those roles to a particular user, it would be creating the following conflicts. It would create 15 conflicts, which isn't so bad. And these are the conflicts that it would create. Okay, so not terrible. So if this was like a new GL accountant, I could absolutely give them access to these roles and not create a lot of issues. Now, if there was something that I saw that maybe they shouldn't have access to, I might want to figure out, you know, which role needed to be changed or something like that, okay? So we have that information available. That's how that role conflicts report works. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and move over to the audit trail, and that concludes the Assure part of the demonstration. But again, at the end we'll have questions if anybody has questions, or if you'd like to see more, have a better understanding of this, and you know, or maybe there's others in your organization that would like to see this, please contact your contact, and we'll go ahead and get another demo set up. Okay, audit trail. This is the reporting side, but before we go to the reporting side, I'm actually going to jump out of here for 1 second, and we're going to go to the configuration side. We're going to talk about how we set up Audit Trail. And Audit Trail is actually very easy to configure. We launch the configuration pane. We go ahead and connect to the server where our NAV databases are. So we're going to go ahead and launch that, and we're going to see our databases, and we're going to go ahead and connect to those databases. When we do that, if we have multiple companies, we can pick a company. We can still audit all the companies, and you can actually copy audits from one company to another, so you don't have to do the setup manually more than once. But we'll just go ahead and log into Cronus for right now. And when we do that, it's going to go ahead and load all of the tables and with all of the columns within those tables. So here on my left-hand side, I have a list of all of the tables within the database, regardless of origin. So again, if you have custom tables, we can see that, we can audit that. On the right-hand side, we have what we've selected to audit. So right now we're auditing customer, we're auditing employee, HR setup, user setup, vendor, the object table, things like that, okay? And we can tell because if we scroll down in the table listing here, anything that we've set to audit is going to be highlighted in blue. So if we look here, the customer table is highlighted in blue, which means that we have now set audits up on that. And if I expand this, I can see the columns that have been selected to be audited. I don't need to select every column. We don't recommend that you select every column. We recommend that you select the columns that are going to be business critical. If there's only 3 columns in the customer record that are business critical, that if they change are going to have a significant impact on your business, select only those 3 records. No one wants to weed through reports that have tons of data on there that aren't really pertinent to the business as far as risks go. So if it doesn't matter what their county is, you're not really even using that field, uncheck it, don't track it, okay? So if the bill to customer number, again, unimportant, if it is, uncheck it, don't track it. Okay, track only the objects that are critical to your business that if changed could create an impact. Okay, and that goes true for any table that you're looking at. So you can be very discriminate as to what you are deciding to audit with our tool. You don't need to audit everything. You can audit specific, very, very specific items within the database. Okay, once these audits are set up, once you've made your selections, you would then generate the triggers. So what this does is this does put triggers on those columns and on those tables in the database to track that information as it changes. Now here you have a list of all your NAV companies. So if you'd like to apply the same audits to each company, you can go ahead and do that. Okay, so you don't need to actually do this manually for every company. You can just use this functionality here to have a copy. So I'm going to go ahead and apply these audits to both Cronus and Fastpath. I would click OK. This is going to go ahead and generate the triggers. It will take a second to finish generating. But once the generation of the triggers is done, we'll get a message saying that the triggers have been successfully generated. And from that point forward, all of the tracking will take place. So anything that was already being tracked is going to continue to be tracked. Anything that we've made changes to will either stop tracking for the columns that we've removed, or we'll start tracking for any new columns that we've added. Okay, so that's the configuration module. From there, the reports then are actually found in the GRC Studio. And the reason why we segregate those two processes is because typically the user who configures the audit trail settings may be also looking at the reports, but if you have additional people looking at the audit trail reports that are more functional in nature, you don't want them to have access to that configuration module. Okay, and if we take a look at the reports, they're all pretty similar. So if we look at a NAV customer change report, and I'm going to backdate this a little bit. And if I click on Run Report, it is a consolidated report. So I see the company here in the column, the table name that I'm auditing, the key field, which is the customer number, the field that's being updated, the event type, the old value, the new value, the date, the time, the user, and the application. So if you notice here, I have some changes that are actually happening from Dynamics NAV Classic Client, and then I have changes that are happening from Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. Okay, so we give you a complete picture of how these changes are happening in the system, where they're coming from, how they're being made, etc., so that we can see that you know, we have a better picture. Because if I was to look at this and say, okay, the credit limit is being updated, you know, I might have questions as to why it's being updated, but then I see it's actually being updated in SQL Server, and that's going to give me a lot more questions. Okay, so I'm going to have a lot more questions as to why this is happening. So that's the completeness of this application, where we tell you the origin. We're telling you the origin of where this is happening. So again, any one of these you can print, you can export, you can filter. So if I only wanted to see changes that happen in Cronus, I absolutely could. I can save these filters. So if I hit Save Filter, I can just call it Cronus only. I can give it a name and a description. I can make it report specific or application wide. And that way, the next time I come into the report, instead of having to build that filter, I can go ahead and apply it under the Apply filter. So if I just wanted to see Cronus only, I could go ahead and do that, and now that filter is already there. I didn't have to go ahead and select it. Okay. Again, like I said, these audit trail reports ship out of the box, but you can continue to add as many reports as you need to this section. So under the administration tab, there is a report generator. We teach you how to go ahead and continuously add new reports to these sections, so that you're able to go ahead and add new reports as you're adding new audits. Okay, and then from here in the Audit Trail tool, what I do want to start to talk about a little bit is the functionality of the Audit View. But before I go to that, if I go back to that NAV customer change report, I'll go ahead and run it again. One of the things that the auditors always talk about is not just having these reports, but that you're actually reviewing the reports, right? So if we collect all this data and we have all these great reports, but no one ever looks at them, no one ever reviews them to make sure that there's nothing happening that shouldn't be happening, or that everything looks good, or that people, you know, have access they shouldn't have, etc. Then from here, we shouldn't even bother to have an audit trail tool, right? If nobody's going to be doing reviews, we wouldn't even bother to have a tool, because if they're just collecting data for the sake of collecting data, it doesn't really help you or help your organization in any way. And so what the auditors are interested in is the fact that if we have this data, that someone is actually reviewing it, they're looking at it, they're making sure that these changes are indeed appropriate, etc. And so what we have the ability to do is we have the ability to electronically sign off on these reports. We have the sign report dialog box that opens up here if we click the sign report button, and we can put in any notes as far as the report that we're reviewing. It's capturing the report name, the date and time that's being signed off on, the user who's signing it, and the parameters of the report, so the start date and the end date of the report that we're reviewing. So if I go ahead and put in some notes and just hit sign, now on my home page I have a report log. I'm sorry, I have a signature log. The report log is just a log of any of the reports that have been run. But I have a signature log here that tracks all of the reports that have been signed off on. So I have the report, the module it came from, who signed it, the note, the parameter of the report, so the start date and the end date, the date and the time. Okay, so I have a record here of all of those reports that have been signed off on. The other thing with the Audit Trail tool is the ability to actually manage data. So one of the biggest questions that we always get regarding Audit Trail is data. How much of it is retained, how much data is actually created, etc. And for some of these questions, the answer is it depends. So how much data is created? Depends. It depends on what you're tracking. Obviously, the more columns in a table you track, the more data you're going to create. The more records that your organization creates in a week, a month, a year, the more data you're going to create. If you have an organization and you're tracking vendors and you only create 5 vendors a month, you're going to have significantly less vendors than the customer who's creating 100 vendors a month, right? So it is a very subjective answer as to how much data you actually create, because it depends on a lot of different factors. What we can estimate is that for every 1,000,000 rows of audit trail data, it creates about a gig of database space, okay? Now, some companies can get to 1,000,000 rows of data in 6 months. Others might take 6 years. It all depends, again, on what's being tracked, what's the volume of the items that are being tracked. Okay, but one of the things that we can do is we can manage that data. So under the Data tab, we have a Manage Data window that allows us to archive and purge the audit trail data. So we can archive data from live tables into the archive tables, and what that does is that just makes our reports run a lot faster. So maybe we archive everything older than a year, everything older than 6 months, whatever your policy may be. It's as simple as just picking the date, archive older than, click on archive data, and it just moves it, and it moves it rather quickly. So let's say I have 12,589 rows. If I archive 6 months worth of data, this actually goes down to about 6,000 rows. My report's going to run a little bit faster when it's only looking at 6,000 rows rather than looking at all 12,000. Okay, and let's multiply that out. If we're a bigger organization and we have 120,000 rows of data versus 60,000, our reports are going to run faster after archiving. Okay, you can always restore data from an archive though. So let's say I archive every 6 months. But at the end of the year, I need a full year report for something. I need to run all 12 months. I just restore the data, run my report, then I can re-archive. And then If you have a policy that says, you know, audit trail data is not really like financial data, we don't need to keep it 7 years, maybe we only need to keep 3 years or 4 years, you can purge any archived data. A purge is an actual delete. The data will be gone. There's no way to restore it unless you have a database backup, but it does clean out that data for you. So you have the ability to do that right from within the system. Okay, so we do have the ability to manage data. And then finally, in the last few minutes here, what I wanted to talk about is the Audit View tool. So we talked about the Audit View tool being a report scheduling tool, and you're able to build an internal audit calendar from here. And so there's a couple of different ways to do that. Any report that you're in, so let's say if we go back here to the customer change report, or maybe even the signature log, if we wanted to schedule this for automatic delivery, we have an add to schedule button here at the top. So if I clicked on add to schedule, I could schedule the signature log to be sent to a user at any period that I want. So if I wanted to say signature log, and we'll go ahead and click next. Okay, and then next, we can go ahead and hit save, and now we can build a delivery model as to who should get this. So we're going to send this to Michael Cassidy, and we're going to go ahead and have it delivered to him in PDF. And this is going to be a daily report or a weekly report or a monthly report. We'll make it monthly. And we're going to have this delivered on the 15th of every month. Okay? And we're going to have this start on August 15th. And we're not going to give it an end date, so we'll go ahead and click next, and we can schedule this. Okay? So now we could go to another report, and again, we can just go back to, you know, the actual report itself and click the add to schedule button. Like, so if we want to do it for the NAV customer changes, we could do that, or right from within Audit View, okay, if we're in the report library, we can click new report, and we can say this is weekly customer log. Actually, I have a report named that already. So we do have safeguards so you don't build the same reports over and over, which in our demo system you'll see that we go ahead and do that. And the module that this report is coming from is Audit Trail. The type is a report, and then the report is that NAV customer change report. And we can make this week to date, or we could do previous week to date, month to date. So we could do, you know, previous week, month, quarter, year. If we wanted a daily report, we would do last number of days as 1, but we're going to actually make this a week to date report. We're going to go ahead and click next. We're not going to add a filter, but we could, any of those filters that we've built, that we've saved, you can actually apply to the report. So if you had different companies and you had you wanted a report for one company to be sent to one user and a report for a different company to be sent to another user, you can do that using your filters. Okay, we're going to go ahead and hit save, and now that that report is created, we're going to click new schedule and determine who should get this. So we want this sent out in Excel, but we're also going to save it to a folder in PDF, so we can do that here as well. Click OK and add, and then this is a weekly report. We want this delivered every Monday, and we're going to go ahead and have that start on the 27th, not give it an end date, click next. And now it looks good to go, so we're going to go ahead and hit schedule. Okay, so now we have that report scheduled. This is a list of all the different reports that we have scheduled. We can run them on demand just to see what comes out of it. We can delete. If let's say the user who needs to get this report changes, maybe Cassidy left the organization, we have a new user, you can just hit edit schedule. You don't need to delete the entire report and start over, okay? And then the other thing within the Audit View module is the ability to actually create a review plan. And a review plan is really all the different reports and who should be reviewing them and when. So here we have, you know, customer changes from the previous week needs to be reviewed every week. So we can see that on our calendar. Let's see if we have anything else on here. Yeah, so we have a bunch of different reports. It looks like Solberg is actually the person that has to do a lot of the reviewing. So if we pull up Solberg's calendar, we can see he's actually the one in charge of the weekly vendor changes, and apparently this is on his calendar a bunch of different times. But we can see things here that are due or overdue. We can do it for a particular time range. We can do it for a particular report, etc. So we can see all of that. And the way that we get these reviews, if we look at the review plans, these are the reviews that are already set up. Who should be doing this? Who's the reviewer, the time frame, whether or not it's recurring, etc. So we can see all of this here. If we clicked on the yellow, we could see it in the, we can actually edit the review plan here. So basically it's putting in a time frame, if it's a recurrence or not, the report that needs to be reviewed, who the reviewer is, the recurrence pattern, and the range of recurrence. And so we can build that all out so that you can have a nice internal audit calendar of responsibility, who's responsible, etc. And with the newest version of GRC Studio that is released, this actually ties to Outlook, so it's actually going to put Outlook tasks, on the user's calendar so that they know that they have to go in here and do these reviews, etc. Okay, so with that, again, you know, it was a pretty high-level overview, but I've gone through the majority of the functionality of all of the tools, and if I'm going to stop here, give us enough time to kind of close up and end the presentation. So Mike, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and if there's any questions at all, and if not, again, like I said, if anybody would like to schedule a demo of any sort, we can always go ahead and get that done.
All right. All right. First, I want to say that there was a phenomenal presentation. I'd like to thank Liz for taking the time out of her day to do that for us. So thank you very much, Liz. And if anybody has any questions or whatnot, you can get a hold of me. My number is 847-590-3000, extension 295. Or you can email me at michaeli@solsys.com. And like Liz said, if you want to schedule a demo or anything, get a hold of me and we'll get a hold of Liz and you know, we'll make it happen. So once again, just want to thank Liz, and I look forward to your questions. Have a great one, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.